Is 30 minutes of exercise enough to lose weight? You may have found yourself Googling this question, being told different things. No, you have to work out for hours and hours. Or some people say, yeah, 30 minutes is enough. Well, I'm going to tell you that depending on what your specific goals are, context matters. But I can guarantee that most people who I've been able to see through coaching, talking about their fitness goals, can manage to do all those things doing 30-minute workouts. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how we get you closer to that goal and what makes the big difference. Yeah, 30 minutes can be enough, but context matters. So 30 minutes of exercise, kind of watching your favorite TV show at the gym, lightly pushing along on whether it's a treadmill or one of those low impact types of cardio machines, or you download some workout that you're not really sure what it's accomplishing, versus 30 minutes of intentional effort where every exercise has a goal. You know why you're doing it. You've been able to track progress, seeing that things are getting better week to week. Those two things are not the same. So exercise, especially when it comes to fat loss, accounts for maybe 5 to 15% of our total caloric energy burn. So it's not adding as much as we'd hope. If you think about somebody doing 30 minutes of effective training, when they're doing a real intense effort, they can do just as much as somebody who's doing 60 minutes of what we call something like a junk volume, or a lot of what these supposed fitness experts tell you now is that you have to continue increasing volume, as though you could just spend an hour and a half in the gym every day like they do, because that's what they're essentially paid to do. Versus for the rest of you who want to look and feel like you have a new lease on life, it's possible to do that in half-hour exercises. We just have to know what we're doing before we go in. Can't just make it up as we go along. So yeah, 30 minutes of exercise is enough. But here's where most people mess this up. If, say for instance, your 30-minute exercise burns 250 calories, also don't believe what your cardio machine tells you in terms of your caloric burn. We could make a whole video just on that alone, but say that's adding on to the normal calories that you burn when you're totally sedentary, not doing anything. And every morning, if you're going through the drive-through and getting your favorite Starbucks added milk and cream sugar drink that essentially completely erases whatever calories that you would have burned. And it's kind of a cliche to say that, I'm going to go burn this food off or something, because our metabolism's not simply ins and outs. But what you do when you replace something like that is you put yourself into this hypercaloric state where the body's going to use that energy. So if exercise isn't the main driver of fat loss, then what is? So I want you to think of a hierarchy of things that are going to add up to big changes as you pursue your fat loss goals. Number one is just thinking of, what are we eating every day? This is your calorie balance. It's kind of like if you're setting up a budget, then you need to know how much money is coming in. If we don't know how much money is coming in, then what we do is we play this game where maybe we're saving more, maybe we're spending more, not really sure. Same is true of having some idea of what you're eating. Now, this doesn't have to be a miserable process, but it's also going to be the most important thing far and away when it comes to getting fat loss is our body ultimately has to use up more energy than it takes in if that is going to be our goal because the energy gets made up from the energy that's in our fat cells. Number 2 would be stuff that doesn't really wear you out, but it's kind of like pseudo exercise. We call this NEAT. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity. Thermogenesis is just a fancy word for this energy that comes from breaking down fat tissue, which then converts to heat. If you ever notice after a hard workout that you feel warm or hot and you're sweating, that is part of that process, is breaking down that energy, using it. So one of the ways that you know that your workout is continuing to burn energy is when you have that feeling like that afterwards. So then we add stuff like actual workouts and things like that on top of this equation, which is going to help us burn some more calories. The other more important thing is having muscle around is just kind of expensive. You can imagine, like, if we take a souped up pickup truck and it's carrying around a ton of weight, how much gas is that thing going to consume versus your small commuter car? Well, the same is kind of true of having muscle tissue around. Even if you're relatively thin and toned and lean, having more muscle tissue around is going to burn more calories than if your body is made up of more fat at the same weight. So, for most folks, you can do things like walking more, using stairs more often, fidgeting. If you do work a sedentary job, maybe consider using things like standing desks. The goal is not to get worn out, it's just thinking about how these things add up over time. Or adding small walks that aren't going to make a huge difference and fatigue you, but they're also going to contribute to your fat loss goal. Sometimes it's where people use things like step counters as a way to keep track of how much of that type of activity I got per day. A common goal would be something like 10,000 steps. And 10,000 steps is going to burn 300 to 500 more calories than, say, getting 3,000 steps per day. So that adds up over time. So your 30-minute workout matters, but what you do the rest of the time, the other 23 hours, matters more. When you do workouts and time is of the essence. So what I do is I train busy people who have high demand careers, have to get a lot done, is we focus more on compound types of movements. Now, there's a movement in the fitness community where they'll say if you're not doing barbell movements or something like that, squat, bench, deadlift, those things, then you're somehow not a real lifter. And I'd say that's not true. Especially if you're a beginner, machines can make a lot of sense. Now, if you're doing a leg machine that recruits the majority of your lower limb musculature, that's going to burn more calories than, say, doing a single joint exercise where you're kicking in one direction. So, when fat loss becomes important, we do want to work the majority of our muscles, especially if you're seeking to change your appearance so that you look more toned or more muscular. Now, how those things differ, I'll get into in another video, but regardless of what your goal is, or you have a goal of, I want to reduce the fat in this area, it's all going to boil down to the same thing. And resistance training will get you to your goals faster than not doing that stuff. So if that's been one of those things that's holding you back, like I'm afraid I'm going to get too big or too bulky, that's not going to just accidentally happen to you. So stop doing endless bouts of cardio. I'd say if you're going to spend that 30 minutes doing something like resistance training is going to pay off more over the long run, especially as you build up more muscle tissue, which will preserve your body composition. Too often what I've seen people is they're kind of phobic of trying types of resistance exercise, or maybe you don't have machines or something like that. Well, that's okay. There's ways around it. Even body weight exercises, we can find ways to make more difficult and add resistance to those things. But that is ultimately going to lead you to looking better as you get leaner versus somebody who is essentially starving themselves. They're going to burn fat and muscle tissue. And we want to keep muscle tissue around regardless of what our goals are. And it's going to help you even for things like longevity when having muscle tissue around helps you to stay able and active, capable of doing things as we lose those muscle tissue fibers over time due to the aging process. We have to actively fight against that. So, one example might be 3 days per week. You do a full body exercise, or if you prefer to do shorter, like a split where you're doing certain muscle groups, you could do something like 5 days per week. And so, what that ends up being is roughly 2.5 hours. Obviously, we have to make that time in the gym as effective as possible. You don't want to be playing on your phone or chatting with people. That 30 minutes is for you, and it's going to be you actively putting in something that's going to really amount to big gains over time if we stay consistent. If all of this seems like a lot, I put together a free guide of things that can jumpstart your fat loss. If you check out the link that's going to be under this video, or I'll post it so that you can view it next to my face. The guide's called Melt Fat Now, and I want you to check that out. See what things in that guide you're not doing yet and give them a shot. If you have questions, ask them down below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. This is Dave, Gym RX. Peace.